The year is 1353, and the world has fallen into a profound, heavy silence. It is a silence not of absence, but of a great, weary resting. The long shadows of a midwinter afternoon stretch across the frozen fields of a small valley in the English countryside, where the earth lies tucked beneath a thick, insulating blanket of pristine white snow. The air is crystalline and perfectly still, so cold that it seems to hold the very breath of the land in a state of suspended animation. There is no wind to stir the skeletal branches of the ancient oaks that stand like silent sentinels along the ridge, nor is there any sound from the village below, save for the faint, rhythmic muffled thud of a single axe splitting firewood somewhere in the distance. The great mortality has receded, leaving behind a world that is sparsely populated, vastly quiet, and moving at the pace of a slow-turning tide. Inside a sturdy manor house built of thick, weathered limestone and heavy timber, the atmosphere is one of absolute, unhurried peace. The walls, 2 feet thick, stand as a bulwark against the biting frost of the outside world. To touch the stone is to feel the history of the earth, cool, slightly rough and grounding. Here in the main hall, the light is dim and amber, filtered through small, diamond-shaped panes of thick, leaded glass that are frosted at the corners with delicate, fern-like patterns of ice. The light pools on the floorboards, highlighting the grain of the oak, polished by the passage of soft-soled shoes and the gentle sweeping of rushes over many decades. In the center of the room lies the hearth, a great cavern of soot-stained stone. A fire has been burning here since the first frost of November, a steady, low-burning companion that requires constant but gentle attention. The logs, sturdy lengths of seasoned ash and slow-burning oak, hiss softly as the heat draws out the last remnants of sap. The sound is a delicate, rhythmic crackle, a tiny percussion of warmth. A single ember, glowing with a deep, pulsing orange hue, shifts slightly, settling deeper into the bed of gray-white ash. The ash itself is as fine as silk, a powdery landscape that holds the heat long after the flames have dipped. Beside the hearth, there is a large, hand-carved wooden chair draped in a heavy cloak of undyed wool. The wool is thick and coarse to the touch, smelling faintly of lanolin and the dry, sweet scent of the heather where the sheep once grazed. The fibers of the cloak are intricate, a chaotic but purposeful weave of grays and creams that trap the warmth of the fire. To run one's hand over the fabric is to feel the labor of the loom, the steady, repetitive motion of the shuttle passing back and forth, hour after hour, in the quiet afternoons of the previous autumn. The task at hand today is simple and slow, the inventory of the winter stores. There is no rush, for the days are short and the nights are long, and the world outside has slowed to a crawl. On a long trestle table made of a single slab of elm, several ledgers lay open. The parchment is thick and creamy, made from calfskin that has been scraped and stretched until it is smooth and supple. To turn a page is to hear a soft, dry rasp, a sound like a sigh. The ink in the horn is dark and viscous, smelling of oak gall and iron. One by one, the items in the pantry are accounted for. The tallying is a meditative process, a focus on the tangible reality of survival and the quiet abundance that remains. There are sacks of grain, barley, rye, and wheat piled neatly in the cool, dry darkness of the larder. The burlap sacks are rough and earthy, the fabric biting slightly into the skin of the palms. Inside, the grains are cool and hard, sliding through the fingers like dry rain when a handful is lifted. They represent the sun of the previous summer, captured and dried, waiting to be ground into the heavy, dark bread that sustains the household. On the shelves above, jars of preserved fruit sit in silent rows. There are plums simmered in honey, their skins wrinkled and sweet, suspended in a golden, translucent syrup. There are pears poached with cloves and cinnamon, the spices lending a faint, warm aroma to the air of the pantry. The glass of the jars is uneven and bubbled, distorting the shapes within into soft, abstract blurs of purple and amber. Beside them are the crocks of salted butter, the lids sealed with beeswax to keep the contents fresh and sweet. The wax is tacky and smells of the meadows, a concentrated essence of 1,000 summer flowers. The cellar beneath the floorboards is cooler still, a realm of earth and stone. Here, the great wheels of cheese reside on wooden racks. They are heavy, dense discs, their rinds rubbed with oil and herbs. The smell is sharp and savory, a grounding scent that speaks of the herd and the pasture. In the corner, the ale barrels stand in a row, their iron hoops glinting dully in the low light. The wood of the barrels is damp to the touch, sweating slightly in the cool air. Somewhere in the shadows, a single drop of condensation forms on a ceiling beam, grows heavy, and falls with a soft, resonant plink into a bucket below. The sound echoes faintly, a heartbeat in the stillness. Back in the main hall, the preparation of a simple evening meal begins. It is a process devoid of urgency. A heavy iron pot is swung over the fire on a creaking crane. The metal is black and pitted, holding the residual warmth of 1,000 meals. Into the pot goes clear water from the well, followed by handfuls of dried peas that rattle against the bottom like small stones. Then come the root vegetables, carrots, parsnips, and turnips, pulled from the earth before the ground froze. They are scrubbed clean, their skins earthy and damp. The knife slices through them with a crisp, satisfying crunch, revealing the pale, dense flesh within. The steam begins to rise from the pot, a gentle, swirling mist that carries the scent of earth and herbs. It curls toward the rafters, where bundles of dried lavender and rosemary hang upside down. The herbs are brittle and gray-green, releasing a faint, ghostly fragrance whenever the air shifts. The ceiling beams are dark with age and smoke, their surfaces carved with the marks of the adze that shaped them centuries ago. To look up is to see the skeletal architecture of security, a framework that has weathered many winters and many sorrows, and yet remains steadfast. As the afternoon light fades into a deep, velvety indigo, the shadows in the hall deepen. The corners of the room retreat into darkness, leaving only the circle of warmth around the hearth. The fire is fed once more, a fresh log of birch added to the pile. The bark of the birch is papery and white, curling back in the heat like a scroll, revealing the pale wood beneath. It catches quickly, a small, bright flame dancing along the edges, casting flickering patterns of light and shadow across the stone floor. There is a basket of unspun wool resting near the chair. The fibers are messy and soft, a cloud of ivory-colored fluff. A drop spindle sits beside it, a simple tool of wood and stone. The act of spinning is a rhythm of the soul, the drawing out of the fiber, the twist of the wrist, the steady rotation of the weight. It is a task that occupies the hands but leaves the mind free to wander through the quiet landscape of memory and peace. The whir of the spindle is a low, hypnotic hum, a sound that blends with the crackle of the fire and the distant, muffled sigh of the winter wind outside the walls. In the village beyond the manor, the few remaining houses breathe out plumes of white smoke that rise straight into the darkening sky. There is no movement in the streets. The inhabitants are tucked away in their own small circles of warmth, mending tools, telling old stories in hushed tones, or simply sitting in the profound, restorative silence. The world is healing. The frenzy of the past years has dissolved into a long, slow exhale. The land is resting, gathering its strength beneath the snow, waiting for the distant promise of a spring that is still many months away. Inside the manor, the table is set for one. A wooden trencher, a simple linen napkin, and a horn cup. The linen is old and soft, the edges frayed but clean. It has been washed in the stream and dried in the sun many times over. The horn cup is smooth and cool, translucent when held up to the firelight, showing the natural grain of the horn. A small loaf of bread, dense and dark, sits on the table. Its crust is hard and floured, smelling of yeast and the wood-fired oven. When broken, it releases a puff of warm, grainy air. The meal is eaten slowly, with a deliberate appreciation for the textures and flavors. The pottage is thick and warming, the vegetables soft and sweet. The bread is chewy and satisfying, a tether to the earth. There is no conversation, only the sound of the spoon against the wood and the soft rustle of the straw on the floor. The world feels small, contained within these four walls, and in its smallness it feels infinitely safe. The wind begins to pick up slightly, a low moan at the eaves of the house, but it only serves to emphasize the stillness within. It is a reminder of the vast, frozen wilderness outside and the preciousness of the light and heat. The fire is banked for the night, the glowing embers covered with a thin layer of ash to preserve them until the morning. The heat will radiate from the stones of the hearth throughout the night, a slow, steady release of energy. The stairs to the sleeping loft are narrow and steep, the wood creaking underfoot with a familiar, comforting groan. The air upstairs is cooler, smelling of dry thatch and old timber. The bed is a large, heavy frame of oak piled high with mattresses stuffed with dried bracken and straw. Over these are layers of linen sheets and heavy woolen blankets. To climb into the bed is to disappear into a cocoon of softness. The blankets are heavy, their weight a physical manifestation of security. As the eyes close, the last thing sensed is the faint, rhythmic pulse of the house, the cooling stone, the settling timber, the dying fire below. The world of the Black Death is gone, replaced by this vast, monotonous, and beautiful quiet. The mind drifts untethered through a landscape of white snow and amber light, falling deeper and deeper into the velvet darkness of a dreamless sleep. The silence is absolute. The rest is complete. The winter night holds the world in its gentle, freezing embrace, and all is still. All is well, all is quiet. The morning arrives not with a burst of light, but with a gradual, imperceptible thinning of the darkness. The world outside the manor remains held in the iron grip of the frost, a landscape of silver and charcoal. Inside the small solar, a private chamber tucked away from the drafty expanse of the main hall, the air is remarkably still. It is a room of heavy drapes and thick stone, designed to hold the meager warmth of a small charcoal brazier that sits in the corner. The brazier is a vessel of pierced iron, its many small holes allowing a soft, rhythmic orange glow to pulse within its belly. The scent of the burning charcoal is clean and dry, a faint metallic tang that mingles with the ever-present aroma of seasoned wood and the ancient, earthy smell of the stone walls. To wake in this room is to experience the slow return of the senses. First, the weight of the covers, 4 layers of heavy, hand-woven wool, each one a different shade of natural cream and soft brown. They press down with a comforting gravity, a physical boundary between the warmth of the bed and the cool, crisp air of the room. The linen sheets beneath the wool are cool against the skin, their texture slightly crisp and smelling of the dried lavender that was tucked into the press during the harvest moons. As the light grows, filtering through the thick, translucent horn panes of the single window, it reveals the intricate patterns of frost that have grown across the interior surface of the walls, delicate, crystalline feathers that shimmer with a ghostly, subterranean light. The first task of the day is one of quiet, methodical preparation. There is no urgency in the movement of feet across the floorboards, which are covered in a thick layer of soft, dried rushes and aromatic herbs. The sound is a gentle, rhythmic hush-hush with every step, a sound that mimics the falling of snow. The water in the ewer is topped with a thin, brittle skin of ice, which shatters with a delicate, musical clink when the ceramic pitcher is tilted. The water is shockingly cold, a sharp, bracing clarity that wakes the skin and focuses the mind on the immediate, tangible present. Moving to the heavy oak desk that sits beneath the window, one finds the tools of the scribe. This desk is a masterpiece of slow craftsmanship, its surface smoothed by generations of elbows and the constant, gentle friction of parchment. The wood is dark, almost black, with a deep, liquid luster that reflects the flickering light of a single tallow candle. The candle, made of rendered sheep's fat, burns with a steady, low flame, its wick occasionally sputtering with a soft, comforting pop. The smell of the tallow is heavy and honest, a scent that speaks of the farm and the cycle of the seasons. The work for this morning is the transcription of the village tithes, a record of what remains, what has been gathered, and what will be sown when the earth finally relents. It is a task of pure logistics, a sequence of numbers and names that form a bridge between the past and the future. Before the writing can begin, the materials must be prepared with the utmost care. This is a process that cannot be rushed, for the quality of the record depends on the patience of the preparation. First, the parchment. A single sheet of high-quality vellum is selected from a cedar chest. The vellum is thick and substantial, having been prepared from the skin of a young calf. It has a slight, velvety nap on one side and a smooth, almost glassy surface on the other. To run a finger across it is to feel the incredible smoothness of a surface that has been scraped and pummeled until all irregularities have vanished. The sheet is laid flat upon the desk, its edges weighted down by small, smooth river stones, polished pebbles of basalt and quartz that are cool to the touch and heavy in the hand. Next comes the preparation of the quill. A collection of goose feathers sits in a small wooden tray, their barbs white and pristine. One is chosen for its weight and the curve of its shaft. It is a secondary flight feather, sturdy and resilient. The process of turning a feather into a writing instrument is a meditation in itself. A small, razor-sharp penknife is used to carefully strip away the lower barbs, revealing the hollow, translucent barrel of the quill. The knife makes a tiny, rasping sound as it carves into the hardened protein of the shaft. The tip of the quill is then cut at a precise angle, a single, decisive stroke that creates the nib. A small slit is made in the center of the nib to allow the ink to flow with a steady, controlled rhythm. The sound of the knife against the quill is a series of minute-sharp clicks, a rhythmic, ASMR-inducing sequence that marks the transition from a natural object to a tool of record. The quill is then tempered by dipping the nib into a bowl of hot sand, which hardens the tip and ensures it will hold its edge through hours of slow, deliberate writing. Then there is the ink. In a small stone mortar, several oak galls, small, round growths harvested from the bark of oak trees, are ground into a fine, dark powder. The pestle makes a rhythmic, grinding sound against the stone, a low-frequency hum that vibrates through the wood of the desk. To this powder, a small amount of copperas or green vitriol is added, followed by a measured pour of clear, cold rain water and a drop of thick, golden gum arabic. As the ingredients are stirred with a small wooden stick, the liquid transforms. It deepens from a pale, watery brown to a rich, obsidian black. The smell is distinctive, ink dark and slightly acidic, with an underlying scent of iron and ancient forests. It is a heavy, viscous liquid that clings to the sides of the inkwell, a small pot made of dark green glass that catches the light of the candle and turns it into a shimmering, emerald pool. The actual writing is the slowest part of the morning. The quill is dipped into the ink, the nib drawing up just enough liquid to form a few careful letters. The first mark on the parchment is a moment of profound stillness. The nib touches the surface with a tiny, dry scratch, and the black ink flows into the fibers of the vellum, creating a sharp, indelible line. Each letter is formed with a series of deliberate strokes, the downward pull of the stem, the elegant curve of the bowl, the fine hairline flick of the serif. The rhythm of the writing is hypnotic. Dip, scratch, pause, scratch, scratch, dip. The sound of the quill on the vellum is the only noise in the room, a delicate, rhythmic rasping that sounds like the breath of a small animal. It is a sound that fills the silence without breaking it, a companionable noise that anchors the room in the present moment. The names are recorded one by one. Thomas the miller, 2 bushels of rye. Elena the weaver, 3 hanks of undyed wool. The names are familiar, the items mundane, but in the act of recording them, they take on a weight of significance. They are evidence of a world that is continuing, a society that is rebuilding itself with the same slow, patient energy that goes into the carving of a quill or the grinding of ink. The ink dries slowly on the page, shifting from a wet, liquid shine to a dull, matte black that seems to sink into the very heart of the parchment. Occasionally, a small pinch of fine, silver sand is sprinkled over the wet ink to hasten the drying process. The sand hisses softly as it hits the parchment, a sound like a tiny, distant waterfall. After a few moments, the sheet is tilted, and the sand is cascaded back into its wooden bowl, leaving the letters clean and sharp. The movement of the sand is a fluid, rhythmic motion, a shimmering veil that passes over the words and leaves them solidified in time. As the hours pass, the light in the room shifts. The sun, though hidden behind a thick veil of winter clouds, moves across the sky, and the shadows in the solar lengthen and rotate. A patch of pale gray light moves slowly across the floor, highlighting the texture of the rushes and the grain of the oak planks. The candle burns lower, its pool of melted tallow growing wider and deeper. The flame remains steady, a tiny golden spear point that wards off the creeping chill of the stone walls. Outside the window, a single crow lands on the stone sill. Its feathers are a deep, iridescent black, and its eyes are sharp and knowing. It ruffles its plumage against the cold, a sound like the rustling of dry silk, before letting out a single, low, muffled caw that sounds like a pebble dropping into a deep well. The sound underscores the vast, echoing silence of the snowy landscape beyond the manor walls. The world is a study in monochrome. The white of the snow, the black of the trees, the gray of the sky. Inside, the work continues. The ledger is a record of resilience, a ledger of the quiet, monotonous tasks that sustain life. There is no drama in the counting of grain or the inventory of wool, yet there is a profound sense of peace in the order of it. The world is being put back into its proper alignment, one name and one number at a time. The hands of the scribe are stained slightly with ink, a dark shadow on the fingertips that speaks of the day's labor. The muscles in the neck and shoulders are tight, but it is a good tightness, the result of focused, purposeful stillness. The heat from the charcoal brazier has permeated the small room, creating a pocket of warmth that feels almost tangible. It is a dry, static heat that makes the parchment feel crisp and the wood of the desk feel warm to the touch. The contrast between this interior world and the freezing wilderness outside is a source of deep, unconscious comfort. To be inside, to be warm, to have a task that requires nothing more than patience and a steady hand. This is the essence of post-plague peace. Eventually, the sheet of vellum is filled. The last name is recorded, the last number tallied. The quill is laid aside, its nib cleaned with a small piece of damp linen. The inkwell is stoppered with a cork, the sound a satisfying, airtight thump. The ledger is closed, the heavy leather cover falling into place with a dull, resonant thud that echoes softly against the stone walls. The work is done for now, but the day is far from over. The world continues its slow, winter rotation, and there are many more hours of stillness yet to come. Standing up from the desk, the body feels heavy and grounded. The movement is slow, a gradual unfolding of limbs. The rushes on the floor crunch softly underfoot, a dry, earthy sound. The room feels smaller now, the shadows having reclaimed the corners. The orange glow of the brazier is the primary light source, casting long, dancing shadows of the chair and the desk against the tapestries that hang upon the walls. These tapestries are thick and heavy, made of wool and lined with linen. They depict scenes of the harvest, men and women working in golden fields, the sun a great stitched circle of yellow silk. In the dim light of the solar, the figures seem to move slightly, a trick of the flickering embers. They are a reminder of the warmth that will return, the cycle that never truly breaks. But for now, the winter is enough. The silence is enough. The slow, rhythmic pulse of the manor is a lullaby, a promise of continued safety in a world that has finally found its breath again. The scribe moves toward the door, their footsteps muffled and slow. The air in the hallway beyond is cooler, a refreshing contrast to the dry heat of the solar. The manor is a labyrinth of shadows and quietude, a sanctuary of stone and timber. As the door to the solar is gently closed, the latch clicking into place with a soft metallic finality, the room is left to its own devices, to the dying candle, the pulsing charcoal, and the heavy, ink-stained silence of the winter morning. The descent from the quiet, elevated solar to the lower reaches of the manor house is a journey through shifting gradients of temperature and light. The staircase, carved from massive blocks of solid gritstone, is cool and unforgiving underfoot. Each step is a deliberate placement of weight, a slow movement that echoes softly against the lime-washed walls. The air here is heavier, carrying the foundational sense of the house: damp earth, old mortar, and the faint, lingering sweetness of stored apples. As one moves lower, the dry, refined warmth of the upper chambers gives way to a more primal, humid heat that emanates from the direction of the great kitchen. Entering the kitchen is like stepping into the very heart of the manor's endurance. It is a vast, vaulted space where the ceiling is lost in a permanent haze of thin, blue wood smoke that clings to the blackened rafters. The walls are thick, built to withstand the heat of a fire that rarely, if ever, goes out. In the center of the room stands a massive oak table, its surface scarred by decades of chopping, kneading, and scouring. The wood is seasoned and hard, its grain filled with the fine white dust of flour and the faint, oily residue of many seasons of preparation. The primary task for this mid-morning hour is the maintenance of the copperware. In a world where resources are precious and labor is a slow, rhythmic devotion, the care of tools is a meditative necessity. On the edge of the table sits a large, heavy cauldron. Its surface is currently a dull, weathered brown, coated in the oxidation of the damp winter air. Beside it lies a small wooden bowl filled with coarse sea salt, a jar of sharp, pungent cider vinegar, and a heap of fine, dry river sand gathered from the banks of the stream before the first hard freeze. The process of cleaning is an exercise in tactile repetition. A small piece of rough linen is dipped into the vinegar, then pressed into the salt and sand. The first stroke against the copper is a harsh, abrasive rasp, a sound that vibrates through the metal and into the bones of the hand. It is a grounding sensation, a physical connection to the material. With slow, circular motions, the cleaning begins. The acidity of the vinegar reacts with the salt, biting into the tarnish, while the sand provides the friction needed to peel away the layers of dullness. The rhythm is steady: scrub, dip, rotate, scrub. There is no hurry. The world outside is frozen, the fields are sleeping, and the only clock is the slow burning of the logs in the hearth. As the tarnish gives way, the true color of the copper begins to emerge. A deep, glowing rose gold that catches the flickering light from the fireplace. The sound of the scrubbing changes as the surface becomes smoother, shifting from a gritty rasp to a softer, rhythmic shush-shush. The smell is metallic and sharp, a clean scent that cuts through the heavy aroma of the roasting meat hanging near the fire. The heat from the hearth is a constant companion. The fireplace is a cavernous opening in the far wall, large enough for a man to stand inside. A thick, iron spit sits empty for now, its gears greased with tallow to prevent the scream of metal on metal. The fire itself is a bed of deep, glowing coals, topped with two massive logs of elm that smolder with a slow internal intensity. The heat is a physical weight, pressing against the skin, inducing a state of calm, heavy lethargy. Occasionally, a pocket of air trapped in the wood expands and bursts with a soft, muffled thump, sending a small cascade of sparks up the wide, soot-lined chimney. After the copper has been polished to a warm, liquid shine, it must be rinsed. A bucket of water, drawn from the deep well in the courtyard, stands nearby. The water is so cold it feels like a needle against the skin. When it is poured over the copper, it sheets off in a shimmering veil, carrying away the gray slurry of salt and tarnish. The sound of the water hitting the wooden floor slats is a resonant, splashing melody. The copper is then dried with a soft, clean cloth, the fabric catching on the tiny imperfections of the hand-beaten metal. The finished vessel is placed on a high shelf, where it reflects the entire room in its curved, golden surface, a distorted and peaceful miniature of the kitchen's life. Beyond the kitchen lies the buttery and the larder, rooms of profound coolness and shadows. Moving into the larder is like entering a sanctuary of stillness. The floor here is beaten earth, packed hard over centuries, which maintains a constant, chilling temperature that preserves the bounty of the previous autumn. The walls are lined with deep wooden bins and sturdy shelves. On the lowest shelves, the root vegetables reside in their beds of dry sand. There are carrots, their skins a dusty orange, parsnips pale and tapered, and heavy bulbous Swedes. To reach into the sand is to feel the preserved cold of the earth. The vegetables are firm and heavy, smelling of the soil they were pulled from. They are sorted with slow, deliberate movements, checking for any signs of softening. Each one is a small, dense package of sustenance, a quiet victory over the encroaching winter. Above the roots, the winter fruits are stored with even greater care. These are the late harvest apples, the russets and the pearmains, whose skins are thick and leathery. They are laid out on straw-lined racks, ensuring that no two fruits touch one another. The scent in this corner of the larder is intoxicating, a deep, concentrated aroma of fermenting sugar, dry straw, and cold air. It is a fragrance that evokes the memory of the golden September sun, now distilled into this dark, quiet room. Each apple is inspected with the pads of the fingers, feeling for the slight give that indicates it should be used sooner rather than later. The touch is gentle, a reverence for the fragile continuity of the food supply. In the corner of the larder stands the great salt box, a heavy chest made of seasoned larch. Inside is a mountain of gray, crystalline salt, harvested from the coastal pans far to the east. The salt is coarse and sharp, clumping together in the damp air. This is the preservative of life. In several large ceramic crocks nearby, pieces of pork are submerged in a thick brine, their surfaces weighted down by smooth, heavy river stones. The stones are dark and wet, their weight ensuring that the meat remains protected from the air. The process of salting is one of the most ancient and monotonous tasks of the manor, a slow alchemy that turns perishable flesh into a durable resource that will last until the first greens of spring appear. Moving back toward the light of the kitchen, one passes the bread oven, a rounded dome of brick built into the side of the chimney stack. It is currently cooling, having been fired early the previous morning. The bricks still radiate a gentle, fading warmth that smells faintly of toasted grain and yeast. A few crumbs of dark crust lie on the hearthstone, small and dry. The oven represents the cycle of the week, the heavy kneading of the dough, the rising in the warmth, and the final, transformative heat. It is a silent witness to the most basic of human needs, its form solid and reassuring. High above, hanging from the beams, are the herb bundles. These were gathered in the waning days of summer when the oils were most potent. There is sage, with its soft, velvety gray leaves, thyme, a cloud of tiny, brittle stems, and rosemary, stiff and needle-like. As the warm air from the kitchen rises, it brushes against these bundles, releasing a ghostly, medicinal fragrance that weaves through the smoke. The herbs are dry and fragile, snapping with a sharp, clean sound when a sprig is taken for the evening's pottage. They are the ornaments of the kitchen, the small touches of flavor and healing that make the monotonous diet of the winter months bearable. In a small, specialized cupboard near the spice chest, the more exotic treasures are kept. This chest is made of dark, aromatic cedar and is fitted with a small iron lock. Inside, in tiny wooden drawers, are the spices that have traveled across oceans and deserts to reach this quiet English valley. There are peppercorns, hard and wrinkled like tiny black stones, cloves, shaped like miniature nails, and a single precious root of ginger, dry and gnarled. To open this chest is to invite a sudden, brief invasion of the world beyond the manor, a scent of heat, dust, and distant lands. But even these are handled with the same slow, methodical pace. A single clove is selected and ground in a small brass mortar, the pestle making a rhythmic, ringing sound against the metal. The powder is fine and pungent, a concentrated essence of another world, used sparingly to brighten the gray winter days. As the sun reaches its zenith, though it remains invisible behind the heavy, leaden sky, the light in the kitchen reaches its most consistent level. It is a flat, even light that reveals every texture: the soot on the stones, the grain of the wood, the glint of the copper, and the fine, dancing motes of dust that hang suspended in the warm air. The house feels full, not of people, but of things. It is full of the weight of its own history, the solidity of its walls, and the slow, rhythmic pulse of its daily operations. There is a stool by the fire, its legs worn smooth by the passage of feet. Sitting here, one can observe the entire ecosystem of the kitchen. The water in a small pot begins to simmer, a low, rhythmic bubbling that sounds like the purring of a large cat. A thin stream of steam rises from the lid, twisting and turning in the drafts that sneak in under the heavy oak doors. The world of the Black Death, with its chaos and its terror, feels like a distant, half-forgotten dream. In this kitchen, in this moment, there is only the reality of the stone, the wood, the salt, and the fire. The silence of the house is not an empty thing. It is a thick, textured silence, composed of 1,000 small, monotonous sounds that blend into a single, hypnotic hum. It is the sound of the house breathing, of the wood settling, of the fire consuming itself, and of the winter air pressing against the glass. It is a sound that invites the mind to let go of its worries, to focus only on the immediate sensation of warmth against the skin and the slow, rhythmic beating of the heart. The task of the morning is complete. The copper is bright, the stores are inventoried, and the spices are prepared. The body feels a deep, pleasant tiredness, a desire to simply sit and exist within this pocket of security. The world outside may be cold and indifferent, but here, Within these thick stone walls, there is a profound and unchanging peace. The shadows begin their slow, afternoon crawl across the floorboards, marking the passage of time without the need for a clock. The day moves on, slow and heavy, like a deep river flowing through a frozen landscape, and the mind drifts with it, sinking deeper into the cozy, monotonous comfort of the winter afternoon. The transition from the sheltered, humid warmth of the manor's kitchen to the open expanse of the inner courtyard is a sudden, sharp intake of breath. The air outside is a physical presence, a weightless but piercing clarity that fills the lungs with the scent of absolute stillness. The sky has transitioned from a leaden gray to a pale, luminous violet, the color of a bruised plum, as the short winter afternoon begins its inevitable descent toward twilight. The snow in the courtyard is deep and undisturbed, a vast, undulating sea of white that has drifted against the stone walls of the granary and the stables. Every footstep is a deliberate, slow-motion event. The boot sinks through the crystalline crust, creating a crisp, dry crunch that echoes with startling clarity against the silent buildings. Beneath the crust, the snow is powdery and soft, offering little resistance but requiring a rhythmic, high-stepping gait that slows the world down to the pace of a heartbeat. The courtyard is a study in geometry and silence. The well in the center is capped with a conical roof of weathered shingles, each one rimed with a thick layer of hoarfrost that looks like delicate white fur. The iron chain, frozen solid, hangs in a stiff, unyielding arc, its links coated in a translucent glaze of ice. There is no movement here, save for the faint, shimmering dance of diamond dust, microscopic ice crystals suspended in the air that catch the dying light and sparkle like a billion tiny stars. It is a world suspended in glass, a moment of post-plague history where the frantic movements of the past have been replaced by a long, cold, and deeply restorative sleep. The destination is the Great Stable, a long, low building of timber and cob that sits on the northern edge of the manor complex. As the heavy oak door is pushed open, the hinges, though well greased with mutton fat, give a slow, resonant groan that seems to vibrate through the very wood of the structure. Stepping inside, the temperature rises instantly. It is not the fierce, dry heat of the hearth, but a living warmth, a humid, heavy atmosphere created by the breath and bodies of the livestock. The smell is a complex, grounding tapestry of scents. The sweet, dusty aroma of dry hay, the sharp ammoniac tang of fresh straw, the earthy smell of manure, and the deep, comforting musk of the horses themselves. The horses are resting, their large, powerful forms visible in the dim, golden light that filters through the high, narrow vents. They are the engine of the manor's survival, the beasts of burden that will turn the soil when the thaw finally comes. A large plow horse, a massive creature of dappled gray and charcoal, shifts its weight in a bed of deep straw. The sound is a rhythmic, rustling hush, followed by the low, vibrating thud of a hoof against the earthen floor. The horse lets out a long, slow sigh, a plume of white steam erupting from its nostrils and curling into the rafters. There is a profound sense of companionship in this space, a shared endurance between man and beast that requires no words, only the steady, monotonous rhythm of care. The afternoon's task lies at the far end of the stable, in a small, partitioned area used for the maintenance of tack and harness. Here, the air is still, and the light is provided by a single oil lamp hanging from a peg. The lamp is a simple vessel of beaten brass, its wick trimmed low to produce a steady, yellow flame that smells faintly of pressed rapeseed. On a heavy wooden bench, several sets of leather harnesses are laid out. After the years of neglect during the height of the great mortality, when labor was scarce and the fields lay fallow, the leather has become dry and brittle. It requires a slow, patient infusion of oil to restore its suppleness and strength. A jar of neatsfoot oil sits in a pot of warm water on a small charcoal brazier, keeping the liquid thin and workable. The oil is a deep, golden amber, viscous and heavy. A scrap of old, soft fustian cloth is selected and dipped into the oil. The cloth darkens instantly, the fibers drinking in the grease until they are saturated and heavy. The first application to a long strap of leather is a moment of pure sensory focus. The cloth moves with a slow, circular motion, the oil disappearing into the parched pores of the leather. The color of the strap transforms before the eyes, shifting from a dusty, pale tan to a rich, dark chocolate brown that glows in the lamplight. The sound is a rhythmic, wet shuck-shuck as the cloth passes over the leather. It is a task that cannot be hurried. To rush is to risk uneven penetration. To be patient is to ensure the leather will not snap under the strain of the spring plowing. Each buckle, each brass fitting is worked around with meticulous care. The brass is tarnished to a dull green, but as the oily cloth brushes against it, the metal begins to peek through, a dull, honest yellow that speaks of utility and age. The fingers become coated in the oil, a slick, protective layer that feels warm and heavy. The repetition of the movement dip, rub, circle, pull becomes a form of moving meditation. The mind settles into the rhythm, shedding the complexities of the world outside and focusing entirely on the 3-inch section of leather directly beneath the hand. As the harness is completed, it is hung on a wooden peg where it catches the light with a new, supple luster. It hangs with a heavy, satisfying drape, no longer stiff and resistant but ready for the work to come. The process is repeated with the next strap and the next. There are dozens of them, a mountain of logistics that represents the future of the village's food supply. In the post-Black Death era, where the population has been halved, the value of a well-maintained tool or a healthy horse has doubled. Every act of maintenance is an act of rebuilding, a quiet, boring but essential brick in the wall of a new world. Moving from the leatherwork to the corner of the stable where the tools are kept, the focus shifts from the soft to the hard. A collection of scythes, sickles, and wood axes rests against the wall. Their blades are gray and dull, some showing the orange-red bloom of surface rust from the autumn rains. To sharpen, these is the most hypnotic of all the winter tasks. A large, circular whetstone sits in a wooden frame, its lower half submerged in a trough of cold water. The stone is a fine-grained sandstone, its surface worn into a gentle, concave curve by years of use. The handle of the whetstone is turned with a slow, steady crank. The sound is a rhythmic, watery slosh creak as the stone rotates through the trough and the wooden axle turns in its sockets. A scythe blade is held against the rotating stone with firm, even pressure. The interaction of steel and stone produces a high, singing note, a metallic sh that vibrates through the arms and into the chest. A fine spray of gray, gritty water is thrown off the stone, coating the hands in a cool, silty mud. The sparks, if they appear at all, are small and dull, for the stone is wet and the speed is slow. The goal is not to create a flash of heat, but to gently grind away the imperfections of the edge. The blade is moved back and forth across the stone in a long, sweeping arc that mimics the motion of the harvest. The sound of the grinding is constant and monotonous, a white noise that drowns out all other thoughts. With every pass, the dull gray of the steel is replaced by a thin, shimmering line of bright silver. The new edge, sharp enough to catch the light and eventually the stalks of grain. The water in the trough becomes dark and opaque, filled with the microscopic dust of the stone and the steel. It is a liquid history of the morning's labor. After the grinding is done, the blade is honed by hand with a smaller, finer whetstone, a cigar-shaped piece of slate that is rubbed along the edge with a light, flicking motion. The sound changes to a delicate, musical clink-tink, a sound like a small bell ringing in the distance. The blade is then wiped clean with a handful of dry straw, the straw snapping and crackling as it removes the moisture and the grit. Beyond the stable, the sun has finally dipped below the horizon. The violet sky has deepened into a cold, electric blue, and the first stars are beginning to pierce through the thinning clouds. The air temperature is dropping rapidly, the moisture in the stable walls beginning to crystallize into new patterns of frost. The horses are settling for the night, their breathing slower and deeper. The large gray horse lets out one final resonant nicker, a soft, vibrating sound that seems to signal the end of the working day. The oil lamp is extinguished with a gentle puff of breath, the flame vanishing into a thin, wispy trail of gray smoke that smells of burnt wick and rapeseed. The darkness that follows is not absolute. The snow outside provides a ghostly, ambient light that filters through the cracks in the door. The transition back across the courtyard is even slower than the first. The cold is more intense now, a biting, crystalline force that makes the skin of the face feel tight and dry. The tracks made earlier in the afternoon are now frozen solid, their edges sharp and brittle. Walking back toward the manor house, the yellow glow of the kitchen windows is a beacon of profound comfort. The smoke from the chimneys rises in straight, unwavering columns, illuminated from below by the internal fires. The house looks like a fortress of warmth in a sea of ice. Every detail, the thickness of the walls, the weight of the thatch, the solidity of the oak doors, speaks of security. The world is vastly different than it was a few years ago. It is emptier, quieter, and more precarious. But in the rhythmic maintenance of a leather harness or the slow sharpening of a scythe, there is a sense of continuity that transcends the chaos of history. As the heavy door to the manor is reached, the hand pauses on the cold iron latch. The silence of the winter night is total. There is no sound of wind, no sound of water, no sound of human activity. It is a silence that feels ancient and limitless. The Black Death was a storm that broke the world, but this winter is the calm that follows. It is a time for mending, for resting, and for the slow, monotonous accumulation of days. The latch is lifted with a soft, metallic clink, and the door opens to reveal the amber light and the smell of wood smoke. The cold is left behind, the work is done, and the long, quiet evening begins. The interior of the house feels even larger and more silent than before. The shadows have stretched and merged, claiming the corners and the rafters. The only sound is the distant, rhythmic ticking of a cooling pot in the kitchen and the soft, internal settling of the timber frame. It is a house of ghosts, perhaps, but they are quiet, peaceful ghosts, content to let the living move through their slow, repetitive tasks. The body feels the weight of the afternoon, the cold of the courtyard, the humidity of the stable, the oily texture of the leather, and the gritty vibration of the stone. It is a good weight, a physical anchor to the reality of the present. Standing in the hallway, the senses gradually adjust to the warmth. The smell of the stable still clings to the clothes, a comforting, earthy perfume that speaks of life continuing in the face of the frost. There is no need for conversation, no need for light beyond the glow of the hearth. The world has slowed to a crawl, and in this slowness, there is a profound and hypnotic peace. The night stretches out, vast and uncomplicated, a blank page waiting for the slow, careful script of the morning to come. The mind begins to drift, the rhythmic sounds of the day echoing faintly in the silence, as the house and everyone within it sink deeper into the velvet embrace of the winter night. As the last vestiges of the violet twilight surrender to the absolute, velvet blackness of the winter night, the manor house settles into its evening character. The great hall, once a place of bustling communal activity and the clamor of voices, has been transformed by the passage of the plague into a cavern of profound, rhythmic solitude. The light is now entirely internal, provided by the massive hearth and the strategic placement of small, flickering oil lamps and tallow candles. This is the hour of the small tasks, the quiet, repetitive chores that require little thought, but offer a deep sense of order and continuity. In a quiet corner of the hall, near a tapestry that depicts a frozen pond and skeletal trees, sits the great weaving loom. It is a massive framework of seasoned oak, its timbers darkened by age and the oils of 1,000 touches. In the dim light, the loom looks like a slumbering beast, its intricate network of threads forming a complex, vertical forest of ivory and gray. The air around the loom is particularly still, smelling of dry wood, the faint metallic scent of the iron weights, and the rich, earthy aroma of raw wool. The task for this evening is the preparation of the warp, a process of such incredible monotony and precision that it serves as a perfect anchor for a wandering mind. Each individual thread of wool must be inspected, smoothed, and guided through the delicate teeth of the reed. The wool is a natural, unbleached cream, its fibers long and resilient. To hold a single strand is to feel the life of the animal that provided it. It is slightly rough, yet surprisingly soft, with a faint stickiness from the residual lanolin. The movement is slow and deliberate. A single thread is lifted from a wooden basket. The fingers slide along its length, searching for any small knots or irregularities. The sound is a microscopic, dry rustle, a sound so quiet it is only heard in the total absence of other noise. When a knot is found, it is gently teased apart with the pads of the thumb and forefinger, a rhythmic, tactile exercise in patience. Once the thread is smooth, It is passed through the narrow slit of the reed. The reed is made of hundreds of tiny, shaved pieces of cane, held together in a wooden frame. As the thread passes through, it makes a soft, musical zip, a tiny, sharp note that repeats over and over as the work progresses. The rhythm becomes hypnotic. Lift, smooth, zip. Lift, smooth, zip. There are hundreds of these threads, and to rush any one of them is to risk a flaw in the fabric that will not be seen until weeks of weaving have passed. In this post-plague world, where every yard of cloth is a precious asset, this slow preparation is a form of devotion. The mind drifts away from the concept of time, focusing only on the 3 inches of thread directly in front of the eyes. The world outside, the frozen hills, the empty village, the vast and silent woods ceases to exist. There is only the cream-colored wool, the dark oak of the loom, and the steady, rhythmic zip of the reed. Beside the loom stands a smaller, more delicate machine, the spinning wheel. Its large wooden drive wheel is a masterpiece of joinery, perfectly balanced to rotate with the slightest pressure on the foot treadle. Tonight, the wheel requires maintenance. A small pot of linseed oil sits on the floor, its scent clean and nutty. A scrap of linen is dipped into the oil, and the wooden axles of the wheel are lubricated. The oil is clear and viscous, clinging to the wood and darkening it to a deep, lustrous amber. As the oil is applied, the cloth makes a soft, squelching sound against the wood, a wet, rhythmic friction that is deeply satisfying to hear. Every moving part is addressed: the flyer, the bobbin, the spindle, and the crank. The wood absorbs the oil with a silent, invisible thirst. When the maintenance is complete, the treadle is depressed with a slow, experimental motion. The wheel begins to turn, and the sound is transformed. Where before there might have been a faint, dry creak, there is now only a low, resonant hum, a sound like the distant purring of a great cat. The vibration of the turning wheel can be felt through the floorboards, a steady, low-frequency pulse that synchronizes with the heartbeat. In a basket at the foot of the spinning wheel lies a collection of dyed wool, waiting to be spun into yarn. These are the colors of the medieval world, derived from the earth and the plants of the valley. There is woad blue, a deep, dusty indigo that looks like the sky just before the stars appear. There is madder red, a warm, earthy terracotta that suggests the glow of dying embers. And there is weld yellow, a bright, clear color like the first primroses of spring. The dyed wool is kept in separate bundles, and tonight they must be carded together to create a subtle, blended heather. 2 wooden hand cards, faced with hundreds of tiny, bent wire teeth, are used for this task. A small tuft of blue wool is placed on one card, followed by a tuft of red. The 2 cards are then drawn across one another with a slow, sweeping motion. The sound is a rhythmic, metallic rasp, a dry, scratching shhhshhh that is the quintessential sound of the wool worker's evening. With each pass, the fibers are straightened and mingled. The blue and red begin to intertwine, creating a new, complex color that shifts in the firelight. The movement of the arms is steady and circular, a slow dance of alignment. As the wool is transformed from a chaotic tangle into a smooth, airy roll, a ralag, it becomes incredibly light, almost like a cloud of colored smoke. To touch the finished ralag is to feel nothing at all. So delicate are the fibers, yet it represents hours of slow, monotonous labor. The fire in the hearth has burned down to a stable, glowing core of orange and gold. The heat it radiates is consistent and dry, making the air in the center of the hall feel thick and comfortable. Occasionally, the house itself makes a sound, a deep, resonant groan as the massive oak timbers contract in the tightening grip of the external cold. It is a sound of strength, not of weakness. It is the house adjusting its bones, settling deeper into the frozen earth. Across the hall, on a long trestle table, sits a collection of small wooden boxes. These contain the sundries of the household, buttons carved from bone and horn, needles of polished iron, and lengths of silken ribbon. The task of sorting these is perhaps the most monotonous of all. The bone buttons are small, flat discs, some with 2 holes, some with 4. They are cool to the touch and have a slight, organic weight. When they are poured from one box to another, they make a sound like falling rain, a dry, clicking cascade of white noise. Each button is inspected for cracks or chips. The fingers move through the pile with a slow, searching motion, a tactile exploration of smooth surfaces and sharp edges. The horn buttons are different, darker, more translucent, with a natural grain that looks like the rings of a tree. They feel warmer than the bone, more supple. The sorting is done by size and by material, a slow categorization that brings a sense of quiet accomplishment. In a world that has seen so much chaos, the simple act of putting buttons into their correct boxes is a powerful, if small, assertion of order. The needles are kept in a small, cylindrical case of turned boxwood. One by one, they are removed and wiped with a cloth lightly coated in tallow to prevent rust. The needles are thin and sharp, their eyes tiny, silver circles that catch the light. The sound of the needle being drawn through the tallow-coated cloth is a faint, high-pitched scritch. It is a sound of preparation, of ensuring that when the time comes to mend a cloak or sew a new tunic, the tools will be ready. As the night deepens, the silence of the manor house becomes almost tangible. It is a silence that has a weight and a texture like a thick woolen blanket. The world outside is a frozen wasteland, but here, within the circle of the firelight, there is a profound sense of safety. The Black Death is a shadow that has passed, leaving behind a world that is simpler, slower, and more focused on the essential rhythms of life. There is no need for haste, no need for the frantic energy of the years before the plague. The population is smaller, the pace is slower, and the days are filled with these quiet, monotonous tasks. The tallow candle on the table has burned halfway down, its flame steady and unwavering in the still air. A small pool of melted fat has gathered at the base of the wick, clear and liquid. Occasionally, a tiny bead of wax will break free and run down the side of the candle, cooling and hardening into an opaque white rib. The movement is so slow it is almost invisible, a frozen record of the passage of time. The smell of the tallow is comforting, a heavy, honest scent that anchors the room in the physical world. The shadows on the walls are long and soft, moving only when the fire settles or the candle flickers. They dance across the tapestries and the stone carvings, turning the familiar architecture of the hall into a landscape of mystery and peace. The high rafters are lost in darkness, a vast, echoing space where the warmth of the fire gathers. Somewhere up there, a single bat might be hibernating, tucked into a crevice of the timber, its heart beating slowly in the winter sleep. In the kitchen, the last of the embers have been covered with ash, but the residual heat still permeates the stone walls. The smell of the evening pottage, onions, dried herbs, and slow-cooked grain lingers in the air, a savory ghost of the meal that was. The house is full of these sensory layers: the wood smoke, the wool, the tallow, the oil, and the earth. They create a complex, comforting atmosphere that is both boring and deeply cozy. The body begins to feel the pull of sleep, a heavy, inevitable gravity that slows the movements even further. The task of sorting the buttons is finished. The loom is prepared for the morning's work. The spinning wheel is oiled and silent. There is nothing left to do but exist within the stillness. The mind is clear, the thoughts as slow and rhythmic as the breathing of the horses in the stable. The transition from the hall to the sleeping quarters is a journey through a corridor of cool, quiet air. The footsteps on the floorboards are soft and muffled, a sound that is absorbed by the very walls. The bedroom is a sanctuary of shadows. The bed, with its thick straw mattress and layers of woolen blankets, waits like a warm burrow. To lie down is to surrender to the silence. The weight of the blankets is a physical reassurance, a barrier against the cold and the dark. As the eyes close, the last sound heard is the distant, rhythmic ticking of a cooling timber somewhere in the depths of the house. It is a sound like a heartbeat, a reminder that the manor is a living thing, enduring the winter alongside its inhabitants. The darkness is absolute, but it is not frightening. It is a restorative, velvet embrace. The world of 1353 is a world of quietude, of recovery, and of the slow, beautiful monotony of survival. And in that monotony, there is a perfect hypnotic peace. The deep midnight of the mid-14th century carries a weight that is almost physical. It is a time when the world feels as though it has retracted into the very marrow of the earth, waiting in a state of suspended, frozen grace. In a small, high-ceilinged chamber situated at the very top of the manor's eastern tower, the air is remarkably still and dry. This room, the herbarium and seed store, is a sanctuary of dormant life. The walls here are lined from floor to ceiling with hundreds of small, pigeonhole shelves, each containing a bundle of dried herbs, a ceramic jar, or a meticulously tied linen pouch. The scent in the room is a dense, intoxicating layer of botanical ghosts: dried peppermint, bitter rue, sweet chamomile, and the sharp, medicinal tang of valerian root. A single lantern sits on a low, heavy table made of seasoned pearwood. The lantern's panes are made of thin, shaved horn, which diffuses the light into a soft, buttery glow that eliminates all harsh shadows. The light pools on the surface of the table, highlighting the fine, dusty residue of years of botanical study. The task for this silent hour is the inventory and cleaning of the spring seeds. This is perhaps the most quiet and vital of all the post-plague winter chores, for these tiny, hard grains represent the survival of the village in the year to come. In a world where so many have been lost, the preservation of the harvest is a sacred, monotonous duty. On the table sits a large wooden tray with shallow sides. A small linen bag, tied with a simple twine knot, is lifted from its shelf. The fabric of the bag is old and gray, the weave slightly loose. As the twine is slowly unknotted, the sound is a tiny, dry friction, a microscopic rasp of fiber against fiber. The bag is then inverted over the tray, and the seeds of the winter leek are poured out. They fall with a soft, rhythmic pitter-patter, a sound like a sudden, gentle rain on a summer roof. The seeds are tiny, black and angular, looking like fragments of obsidian against the pale wood of the tray. The process of cleaning the seeds is an exercise in extreme patience. A small, fine brush made of squirrel hair is used to gently sweep away the chaff, the dried remnants of the flower heads and the dust of the fields. The brush makes a delicate, whispering sound as it moves across the wood. Each seed is inspected with a slow, deliberate gaze. Those that are plump and dark are kept. Those that are shriveled or pale are discarded into a small clay bowl. The fingers move with a rhythmic picking motion, a tactile conversation with the potential of the earth. The repetition is hypnotic, a sequence of sweep, pick, sort, repeat that stretches the minutes into a seamless flow of focused activity. Next come the seeds of the parsnip. These are different, larger, flatter, and winged with a thin, papery membrane. When they are poured onto the tray, they don't rattle like the leek seeds. Instead, they flutter and slide with a soft, dry hiss, like the sound of dead leaves scuttling across a stone path. They are a pale, dusty brown, smelling faintly of the deep, cold earth they came from. Handling them requires a light touch, for the papery wings are brittle in the dry winter air. One by one, they are shifted from the pile to a fresh linen pouch, each movement a slow, graceful arc of the hand. As the work continues, the silence of the tower room is punctuated only by the occasional distant sound of the winter wind. It doesn't howl. Rather, it makes a long, low-frequency hum as it passes over the stone battlements, a sound that vibrates in the very foundations of the tower. It is a reminder of the vast, indifferent cold that surrounds this small pocket of warmth. The interior of the room feels increasingly safe, a fortress within a fortress. The air is warm from the lantern and the residual heat rising from the great hall below, and the smell of the seeds is a promise of the green world that still exists, hidden beneath the snow. Beyond the seeds, there is the matter of the garden tools. A set of small, hand-forged trowels and pruning shears lies on a bench near the window. They are heavy tools, made of iron and ash wood, designed for the slow, methodical labor of the vegetable garden. The iron is currently cold and dull, with a few spots of orange rust where the moisture of the autumn earth clung to the metal. To clean them, a piece of coarse burlap is used, dipped in a mixture of linseed oil and fine, white sand. The sound of the cleaning is a rhythmic, abrasive scratch, a grounding, physical noise that fills the room. The sand acts as a gentle abrasive, scouring away the rust and the dried soil, while the oil penetrates the surface of the iron to protect it from the damp. As the cloth moves back and forth, the dull gray of the metal begins to give way to a dark, oily sheen. The ashwood handles are also treated, the oil sinking into the grain and bringing out the pale, swirling patterns of the wood. The handles feel smooth and warm in the hand, the wood having been polished by the friction of labor over many years. The shears are the most complex to clean. The pivot point is addressed with a single drop of oil, followed by the slow, rhythmic opening and closing of the blades. Click-clack, click-clack. The sound is sharp and clean, a metallic rhythm that speaks of readiness. The edges of the blades are then honed with a small, flat whetstone, a sliver of dark slate that makes a high, singing sound as it slides along the steel. The sound is a thin, silver thread of noise in the quiet room, a note that lingers in the air long after the stroke is finished. Once the tools are cleaned and the seeds are sorted, the focus shifts to a task of even greater sensory depth: the making of the beeswax candles for the altar and the solar. In a large ceramic pot sitting on a small charcoal brazier, several blocks of pure, yellow beeswax are slowly melting. The wax is a byproduct of the manor's own hives, a concentrated essence of the summer meadows. As it melts, it releases a scent that is thick and sweet, a mixture of honey, sun-warmed clover, and the subtle, earthy musk of the bees. The liquid wax is a deep, translucent gold, shimmering in the light of the brazier. A collection of wicks made of twisted cotton thread hangs from a wooden rack. The process of dipping the candles is the epitome of the boring but cozy winter life. It is a task that cannot be rushed, for the beauty of the candle depends on the evenness of the layers. A wick is taken in the hand and lowered slowly into the melted wax. The sound of the wick entering the liquid is a tiny, muffled hiss. It is held there for a heartbeat, then raised with a steady, unwavering motion. As the wick emerges, it is coated in a thin, glistening layer of liquid gold. It is held in the air for a moment, the wax cooling and hardening from a transparent liquid to an opaque, creamy solid. The color shifts before the eyes, a slow transition from amber to pale primrose. The process is then repeated. Down, hold, up, cool. Down, hold, up, cool. With every dip, the candle grows slightly fatter, the layers building up like the rings of a tree. The rhythm is perfectly consistent, a movement that could be performed in a trance. The candles grow in silence. There is no conversation, no music, only the soft crackle of the charcoal and the rhythmic dipping of the wicks. The room becomes a sanctuary of golden light and sweet fragrance. The finished candles are perfectly tapered, their surfaces smooth and slightly tacky to the touch. They represent hours of patient stillness, a physical manifestation of the passage of time. When they are finally finished, they are hung by their wicks to cure, a row of pale, fragrant sentinels that will provide light for the long nights to come. Outside the tower window, the world is a landscape of monochrome stillness. The moon has risen, a pale, cold sliver that casts a ghostly light across the snow-covered valley. The trees are etched in black against the silver ground, their branches motionless in the freezing air. The village below is invisible, tucked beneath the blankets of snow and smoke. It is a world that has been emptied of its frenzy, replaced by a deep, archaeological quiet. The Black Death was the storm. This is the profound, frozen calm that remains in its wake. In the tower room, the lantern is beginning to flicker as the oil runs low. The light dances across the shelves of herbs and the bags of seeds, casting long, rhythmic shadows that pulse like a slow heartbeat. The work is done. The seeds are prepared, the tools are sharp and oiled, and the candles are cooling in the still air. The body feels a deep, grounded sense of accomplishment, not the adrenaline-fueled satisfaction of a great victory, but the quiet, solid peace of a day well spent in the service of continuity. The descent from the tower is a slow, rhythmic journey down the spiral stone staircase. Each step is a familiar vibration, the stone cool against the soles of the feet. The air grows warmer as one nears the living quarters, carrying the scent of the dying fire and the lingering aroma of the evening meal. The manor house feels like a living creature, its stones and timbers settled into a deep winter slumber. It is a house that has survived the worst of times and is now content to exist in the best of silences. In the solar, the small charcoal brazier is still glowing, a single eye of orange in the darkness. The room is filled with the soft, comforting textures of the night, the heavy wool of the tapestries, the smooth oak of the furniture, and the velvet darkness that presses against the windows. To prepare for sleep is to enter into a final rhythmic ritual. The clothes are removed slowly, the fabric rustling in the quiet. The linen night shift is cool and crisp, smelling of the lavender that was used to scent the chests. The bed is a vast, soft landscape of straw and feathers, covered in layers of heavy woolen blankets. To climb into it is to disappear into a cocoon of absolute security. The weight of the blankets is a physical pressure that calms the nervous system, a heavy, warm embrace that signals the end of all effort. The mind begins to drift, the rhythmic sounds of the day, the rattling seeds, the scraping metal, the dipping wax, echoing faintly in the consciousness like the distant tolling of a bell. The darkness of the room is complete, but it is a darkness full of presence. It is the presence of the house, the presence of the stored grain, the presence of the sleeping horses, and the presence of a world that is slowly, patiently healing itself. The Black Death is a story told in the past tense. The present is this quiet, monotonous, and beautiful night. The breath slows, synchronizing with the slow, deep pulse of the manor. The eyes close and the world dissolves into a dreamless, velvet sleep, held in the iron and amber grip of a 14th century winter. All is still, all is quiet, all is well. The deep, cavernous silence of the small hours before the first light of dawn is a time of profound transition within the stone walls of the manor. The world outside remains locked in a static, frozen state, the temperature having plummeted to its lowest point in the cycle of the night. In the armory, a small, vaulted chamber situated off the lower gallery, the air is cold enough to make the breath appear as a slow, dissipating ghost of white vapor. This room is a place of iron, leather, and seasoned wood, a repository for the tools of defense that have, since the passing of the great mortality, taken on a new role as objects of quiet, meticulous preservation. The floor is made of massive slabs of slate, dark and cool, which seem to pull the very warmth from the soles of the feet through the thick woolen hose. In the center of the room stands a heavy, three-legged stool and a low workbench topped with a thick slab of oak. Upon this bench sits a large, shallow wooden bowl filled with fine, silver-gray sand, and another, smaller bowl containing rendered mutton fat that has been mixed with a few drops of bitter almond oil to keep it from turning rancid. The task for this hour is one of extreme rhythmic repetition, the cleaning and re-greasing of a hauberk of chainmail. This garment, a complex web of thousands of interlocking iron rings, has been hanging in the damp air of the gallery, and it has begun to show the faintest, almost invisible bloom of surface oxidation, a dullness that threatens the integrity of the metal. The process begins with the sound of the mail being lifted from its wooden peg. It is a heavy, liquid sound, a metallic shh clink as the rings slide over one another like the scales of a great iron fish. The weight of the mail is substantial, a physical burden that speaks of the labor of the blacksmith who hammered and coiled each individual wire. As it is laid out across the oak bench, the mail flows like a dark, heavy liquid, settling into the grain of the wood with a series of tiny, musical clinks. In the dim, amber light of a single wall-mounted oil lamp, the iron rings glint with a soft, subterranean luster, their surfaces showing the minute irregularities of the hand-forged metal. The cleaning is a slow, tactile meditation. A handful of the silver sand is taken from the bowl. The grains are cool and gritty, sliding between the fingers with a dry, whispering sound. The sand is sprinkled over a section of the mail, and then a piece of heavy, coarse sailcloth is used to scour the rings. The motion is rhythmic and circular, a steady, unhurried pressure that drives the sand into the crevices between the interlocking links. The sound is a constant, grinding rasp, a low-frequency vibration that travels through the wood of the bench and into the bones of the arms. It is a grounding noise, a sound that anchors the mind in the physical reality of the iron. Scrub, rotate, sprinkle, scrub. The rhythm is unbroken by thought or conversation. The world of the Black Death, with its chaos and its terror, feels like a story told in a different language, a distant memory that has no place in the rhythmic reality of the iron. As the sand works away the dullness, the true character of the metal begins to emerge. The iron is not a uniform gray, but a complex landscape of charcoal, slate, and silver, reflecting the flickering flame of the oil lamp in 1,000 tiny, distorted mirrors. The fingers become coated in a fine gray dust, a mixture of the sand and the microscopic particles of iron, which feels cool and velvety to the touch. After a section has been scoured, the mail is lifted and shaken. The sound of the sand falling through the links and hitting the wooden bench is like a sudden, sharp burst of rain, a dry, percussive patter-patter-patter that echoes softly against the vaulted ceiling. The process is then repeated on the next section, and the next. There are thousands of rings, and to rush the work would be to leave a hidden pocket of rust that could eventually eat through the metal. In this post-plague world, where resources must be preserved and labor is a slow, careful investment, the maintenance of the mail is a form of quiet, boring devotion to the future. Once the entire hauberk has been scoured, and the sand has been meticulously brushed away with a soft bristled brush made of badger hair, the second stage of the preservation begins. This is the application of the protective grease. A small, square patch of soft, undyed linen is dipped into the bowl of mutton fat and almond oil. The fat is smooth and creamy, having softened slightly in the ambient warmth of the lamp. It has a heavy, honest scent, the smell of the farm and the kitchen, combined with the sharp, clean bitterness of the almond. The application of the grease is a more fluid, silent motion than the scouring. The linen patch is drawn across the surface of the mail, the grease disappearing into the porous surface of the iron and filling the gaps between the rings. The sound changes from a gritty rasp to a soft, rhythmic shuck-shuck, the sound of oiled fabric sliding over smooth metal. The iron transforms under the touch, shifting from a dry, matte gray to a rich, liquid black that looks almost wet. The grease creates a barrier against the damp winter air, a protective seal that will keep the mail supple and strong for the months of stillness to come. As the work progresses, the lamp begins to burn low, the flame dipping and rising in a slow, hypnotic dance. The shadows in the armory shift and grow, the corners of the room disappearing into a deep, velvety indigo. The high, narrow window shows nothing but the absolute blackness of the night, a void that emphasizes the small, golden circle of the workspace. The world outside is a frozen wasteland, a landscape of ice and silence. But here, within the rhythm of the iron, there is a profound sense of continuity. The mail has survived the generations before, and through this slow, monotonous labor, it will survive the generations to follow. The fingers move with a life of their own, tracing the intricate patterns of the weave, 4 rings through one, a geometry of strength that has remained unchanged for centuries. The tactile sensation of the grease on the skin is pleasant, a slick, warming layer that protects the hands from the bite of the cold. The mind drifts through the long history of the metal, the mining of the ore in the dark earth, the smelting in the fierce heat of the bloomery, the drawing of the wire, and the final, rhythmic coiling and cutting. Each ring is a testament to human patience, a small, circular anchor in a changing world. Beyond the armory, the rest of the manor house is silent. The horses in the stable are still, their breath forming small clouds of steam in the darkness. The servants in the lower hall are tucked into their beds of straw, their dreams as quiet and uncomplicated as the winter landscape. The great mortality has left the world with a surplus of silence, a space that is being slowly filled with these small, repetitive tasks. There is no need for the frantic energy of the past. The world has slowed down, and in this slowness there is a new kind of peace, a peace built on the maintenance of things, the counting of grains and the oiling of iron. The hauberk is finally finished. It is lifted from the bench one last time, the sound a heavy, muffled clink as the oiled rings settle. It feels different now, heavier, more substantial, and yet more fluid. It is hung back on its wooden peg where it catches the dying light of the lamp, a shimmering, dark curtain of iron. The workbench is then cleaned with a handful of dry straw, the straw snapping and crackling as it absorbs the excess oil and sand. The tools are returned to their proper places. The brushes, the bowls, and the cloths, each movement a slow, deliberate conclusion to the hour's labor. As the lamp is extinguished, the darkness in the armory becomes absolute for a few moments, until the eyes adjust to the faint, ghostly light of the snow reflecting through the window. The walk back through the gallery is a journey through a corridor of cold, still air. The stone walls feel like the bones of the earth, solid and unyielding. The silence of the house is not empty. It is a thick, textured presence, a container for the slow, rhythmic breathing of the inhabitants and the settling of the timbers. Returning to the warmth of the solar, the contrast is a physical relief. The small brazier is still glowing, a single, pulsing ember of orange in the shadows. The air is dry and smells of the beeswax candles that were made earlier in the evening. The body feels the weight of the labor, the ache in the shoulders, the slickness of the oil on the hands, and the pleasant, grounded tiredness of the early morning. To wash the hands in a basin of cold water is a sharp, bracing finale, the water turning gray as it carries away the dust of the iron. The bed is a waiting sanctuary. To climb back under the heavy woolen blankets is to enter a world of absolute softness and security. The weight of the covers is a reassurance, a physical barrier between the individual and the vast, frozen wilderness of the 14th century night. The mind begins to drift. The rhythmic sounds of the armory, the rasp of the sand, the clink of the rings, the shuck of the oiled cloth, echoing faintly in the consciousness like the distant, hypnotic beat of a drum. The darkness of the room is a restorative velvet embrace. The world is healing itself in the silence. The Black Death was a storm that broke the surface of things, but beneath that surface, the old rhythms of life, the cycles of maintenance, the preservation of tools, the slow accumulation of days, have remained. The winter night holds the world in a state of grace, a time of resting and mending. The breath slows, the heart finds its steady nocturnal rhythm, and the mind sinks deeper and deeper into a dreamless, beautiful sleep, held in the amber and iron grip of the winter peace. All is still, all is quiet, all is well. The pre-dawn light of midwinter is a fragile, ethereal thing, a ghost of a morning that barely manages to penetrate the thick, narrow windows of the manor's small scriptorium. This room, tucked away in the quietest corner of the upper floor, is a sanctuary of record and memory. It is a space where the air is dry and perfectly still, smelling deeply of old parchment, cedarwood, and the faint, sweet residue of dried beeswax. The walls are lined with sturdy shelves of darkened oak, their surfaces smoothed by the constant, gentle friction of leather spines and wooden scroll cases. In this room, the world outside, the frozen marshes, the silent village, and the memory of the great sickness, is kept at bay by a formidable barrier of words and ink. The floor is covered with a thick, hand-knotted rug of undyed wool, which muffles every footstep into a soft, rhythmic thump. In the center of the room stands a slanted writing desk, its surface a single, massive slab of walnut that has been polished until it reflects the dim, gray light like a dark pool of water. The task for these quiet hours, before the rest of the household stirs, is the meticulous inspection and dusting of the manor's small but precious collection of manuscripts and maps. In an era where knowledge is as valuable as grain, the preservation of these documents is a slow, monotonous duty of the highest order. A single oil lamp, its reservoir filled with clear, golden olive oil, sits on a side table. The flame is a tiny, unwavering spear of yellow light that casts long, rhythmic shadows across the rows of books. The first movement of the morning is the selection of a heavy, leather-bound volume from the lowest shelf. It is a register of land tenures, its covers made of thick boards of oak wrapped in dark, oil-tanned calfskin. As it is lifted from the shelf, the sound is a soft, dry rasp of leather against wood, a sound that seems to echo in the profound silence of the room. The book is heavy, its weight a physical manifestation of the history it contains. The volume is placed gently on the slanted desk. The leather is cool to the touch, its surface etched with a fine network of wrinkles and the occasional scar from the animal's life. The first task is to remove the fine layer of dust that has settled on the edges of the pages. For this, a small, specialized brush made of soft rabbit fur is used. The brush is incredibly light, its fibers almost invisible in the dim light. The movement is a slow, rhythmic sweeping, flick, sweep, flick, sweep, along the top edge of the book. The dust motes are disturbed, rising into the air and dancing in the beam of the lamp like tiny golden sparks before settling back into the shadows. The sound of the dusting is a delicate whispering shhh, a noise so quiet it is only perceptible in the absolute absence of wind or conversation. Once the exterior is clean, the book is opened. The sound of the spine creaking is a deep, resonant groan, a slow unfolding of years. The pages are made of high-quality vellum, thick and cream-colored, with a slight velvety nap. To turn a page is a deliberate two-handed operation. The vellum is stiff and resilient, resisting the movement with a soft, dry crackle that sounds like the rustle of autumn leaves. The writing inside is a masterpiece of slow, deliberate script, rows of dark, obsidian letters that march across the page in perfect alignment. The ink has a slight metallic sheen, having been made from crushed oak galls and iron salts. The fingers trace the lines without touching the ink, feeling the slight indentation where the quill pressed into the skin. Each page is a record of a field, a boundary, or a family, a small, ink-stained anchor in the shifting landscape of post-plague England. The inspection is slow. Every corner is checked for signs of damp or the tiny, rhythmic tunnels of the bookworm. In a small wooden box on the desk, there is a collection of repair tools. There is a small jar of hide glue, made from rendered scraps of parchment which has been warmed on a tiny charcoal brazier until it is liquid and clear. The smell is earthy and animal, a primal scent that speaks of the workshop and the tannery. A thin, flat sliver of bone, a bone folder, is used to smooth out a small ripple in the vellum. The sound of the bone sliding over the parchment is a soft, rhythmic slick, a tactile satisfaction that vibrates through the fingers. The pressure is firm but gentle, a slow persuasion of the material back into its proper, flat state. Next, a map of the manor lands is retrieved from a cylindrical case of turned boxwood. The case has a screw-top lid that opens with a long, rhythmic creak of wood on wood. The map is a large sheet of heavy vellum, rolled tight for years. To unroll it is to engage in a slow-motion battle with the memory of the material. Two heavy lead weights, shaped like small lions and covered in soft velvet, are used to hold the edges down. As the map is flattened, the vellum protests with a series of sharp, dry snaps, a percussive rhythm of expansion. The map is a landscape of symbols and colors. The forests are clusters of tiny, emerald green trees. The river is a winding ribbon of lapis lazuli. The manor house itself is a small, carefully drawn square of ochre and red. The light of the lamp moves across the map, highlighting the texture of the vellum and the fine, hairline cracks in the ancient pigments. The task is to update the boundaries of the fallow fields, a process that requires a steady hand and a mind tuned to the slow cycles of the earth. A small cake of dry red ink is rubbed with a few drops of water in a stone saucer until a rich crimson paste is formed. A fine-tipped brush made of squirrel hair is dipped into the ink, the bristles forming a perfect tapering point. The application of the ink is a silent, focused event. The brush touches the vellum with a microscopic hush, leaving behind a line as thin as a spider's silk. The movement is so slow it is almost imperceptible, a gradual extension of the red line across the landscape. The ink dries slowly, shifting from a wet, liquid brilliance to a dull, matte permanence that seems to sink into the very fibers of the vellum. Outside the scriptorium window, the world is beginning to emerge from the darkness. The sky has turned a pale, icy blue, and the frost on the glass has begun to shimmer with a cold, internal light. A single robin lands on the stone sill, its red breast a sudden, vibrant splash of color against the white world. It stays for a moment, its head tilting with rhythmic precision, before taking flight with a soft, muffled whir of wings. The silence returns instantly, deeper and more profound than before. The work in the scriptorium continues with the sorting of the scrolls. These are long strips of parchment, wound around wooden dowels and tied with ribbons of green silk. The ribbons are old and faded, the silk having lost its luster but retained its strength. The knots are untied with a slow, methodical patience, the fingers working the loops until they slide free with a tiny, dry friction. Each scroll is a record of a year's harvest, a tally of grain and wool that forms the backbone of the manor's survival. As the scrolls are unrolled and checked, the sound of the parchment is constant, a rhythmic, crackling dialogue between the past and the present. The air in the room remains warm and dry, a protective envelope for the delicate materials. The smell of the cedarwood shelves, which acts as a natural deterrent to insects, is a constant grounding presence. It is a clean, sharp scent that clears the mind and focuses the attention on the task at hand. The small tasks of the scriptorium are a form of mental housekeeping. There is no drama in the checking of a map or the dusting of a book, yet there is a deep, abiding satisfaction in the order of it. In a world that has seen the structures of society shaken to their foundations, the preservation of the written record is an act of defiance. It is a statement that the future will have a past to look back upon, that the names and the places will not be forgotten. The monotony of the work is its greatest virtue. It is a steady, rhythmic pulse that counters the erratic, chaotic nature of history. As the morning progresses, a tray is brought into the room, a simple breakfast of hard, gray bread and a small cup of warm, spiced ale. The bread is dense and chewy, the crust crackling with a sharp, percussive sound. The ale is fragrant with cloves and cinnamon, its warmth spreading through the body and loosening the stiffness of the early morning. The meal is eaten slowly, with the same deliberate pace that governs the work. There is no need for haste. The winter day is short, but the work is long, and the rhythm is everything. The oil in the lamp is half consumed, the flame remaining steady and calm. The scriptorium is now filled with the soft, even light of the winter morning, a light that reveals the fine grain of the walnut desk and the intricate carvings on the bookshelves. The shadows have retreated to the corners, leaving the center of the room a landscape of clarity and peace. The body feels grounded and still, the mind as quiet as the air. The final task for the morning is the preparation of a new sheet of vellum for a future record. The sheet is large and pristine, its surface as smooth as polished stone. It must be pricked and ruled, a process of creating the guidelines for the writing. A small, sharp awl is used to make a series of tiny, rhythmic holes along the margins. The sound is a sharp, clean pop as the point pierces the skin. Then a long wooden ruler is laid across the sheet, and a piece of lead, a plummet, is used to draw the horizontal lines. The plummet makes a soft, gray scratch as it slides across the vellum, a sound like a distant sigh. The lines are faint but perfect, a geometric grid that will guide the hand of the scribe. The movement is steady and repetitive. A line, draw, shift, a line, draw, shift. When the ruling is finished, the sheet is a blank map of possibility, a space waiting for the slow, ink-stained history of the coming year to be written. As the tools are cleaned and returned to their boxes, the awl, the plummet, the brushes, and the bone folder, the room feels complete. The maps are rolled, the books are shelved, and the vellum is prepared. The silence of the scriptorium is a living thing, a thick, protective layer that has absorbed the labor of the morning. The walk back to the lower floors is a slow, rhythmic descent through the cooling air of the hallway. The manor is waking up, but the peace of the scriptorium remains, a quiet, ink-scented memory that will sustain the spirit through the long, monotonous afternoon. The world of the Black Death is a world of the past. The present is this room, this desk, this parchment. It is a world of slow movements and quiet sounds, of the smell of cedar and the crackle of vellum. It is a world where time is measured not by the ticking of a clock, but by the drying of ink and the turning of a page. And in that measurement there is a perfect, hypnotic peace. The mind drifts, the body rests, and the history of the world continues its slow, rhythmic unfolding, one letter at a time. The sun, having reached its low zenith in the winter sky, begins its long, languid slide toward the western hills. The light that filters through the heavy, leaden clouds is of a peculiar, pearlescent quality, casting no sharp shadows but bathing the manor's outer courtyard in a soft, uniform glow. The temperature remains stubbornly low, a constant crystalline pressure that seems to turn the very air into a solid, breathable substance. In this late afternoon hour, the focus of the manor's slow, rhythmic life shifts toward the most fundamental of all winter necessities, the preservation and preparation of the fuel that keeps the darkness and the frost at bay. On the southern lee of the manor house, sheltered by a high stone wall and a deep, overhanging roof of thatch, lies the wood store. It is a vast, open-sided structure filled with the labor of the previous summer, mountains of logs, split and seasoned, waiting to be transformed into the amber light of the hearth. The air in the wood store is different from the sharp, biting cold of the open fields. It is a dry, aromatic cold, heavily scented with the tannin of oak, the sweet, sap-laden aroma of pine, and the clean, papery scent of birch bark. It is a sanctuary of dormant energy, a physical manifestation of the manor's security. The task for this hour is the slow, methodical transfer of wood from the main store to the smaller interior wood boxes. This is a process of selection and arrangement, a tactile exploration of the different characters of the wood. A heavy wooden barrow, its wheel made of solid elm and rimed with iron, sits waiting. The movement of the barrow over the frozen ground is a series of slow, rhythmic crunch creaks, the iron rim biting into the ice while the wooden axle groans with a low, satisfying frequency. It is a sound that marks the steady, unhurried passage of time in this quiet, post-plague world. The selection of the logs is a deliberate act. Each piece of wood is handled with a slow, sensory appreciation. The oak logs are the heaviest, their bark thick and rugged like the hide of an ancient animal. To lift one is to feel the density of decades of slow growth. The wood is a deep, weathered gray on the outside, but where it has been split, It reveals a pale, honey-colored interior with a grain as tight as a secret. When two oak logs are tapped together, they produce a dull, resonant thud, a sound of solidity and endurance. They are the foundation of the night fire, the logs that will smolder in the heart of the hearth long after the household has fallen into sleep. In contrast, the birch logs are light and elegant. Their bark is a brilliant, papery white, peeling back in delicate, translucent curls that catch the faint light like scraps of ancient vellum. The bark feels smooth and cool, almost like skin. When a birch log is handled, the bark makes a soft, rhythmic crackle, a high-frequency whisper that is one of the quintessential sounds of the wood store. Birch burns quickly and brightly, with a clear, dancing flame that is used to wake the fire in the morning, or to provide a sudden, cheerful burst of light in the deepening twilight. Then there is the ash wood, the firewood of kings. The ash logs are straight and clean, their bark a smooth silver gray. Ash is a miracle of the forest, for it burns well even when the air is damp, its heat steady and its smoke minimal. The grain of the ash is straight and open, and to run a thumb along the split surface is to feel the incredible smoothness of the fibers. The logs are stacked into the barrow with a rhythmic, percussive clonk clonk clonk, the sound echoing softly against the stone wall. The pile grows slowly, a geometric arrangement of textures and weights. As the barrow is filled, the physical effort of the task provides a gentle, internal warmth that counters the biting air. The hands, protected by heavy mittens of felted wool, feel the rough edges of the wood through the thick fabric. The movement of the arms is steady and circular, a repetitive motion that induces a state of calm, focused boredom. The world beyond the wood store, the empty village, the vast and silent forests, the memory of the great mortality, is reduced to the simple, tangible reality of the logs and the barrow. In this moment, there is no history, only the weight of the oak and the scent of the pine. Once the barrow is full, the journey back to the kitchen entrance begins. The path is narrow, hemmed in by drifts of snow that have been swept into high white ramparts. The barrow moves with a slow, heavy momentum, the iron wheel singing a low, metallic note as it rolls over the packed snow. The sound is a constant, rhythmic shh crunch, a white noise that blends with the distant, muffled sigh of the wind in the chimney pots. The air is so still that the smoke from the manor's chimneys rises in perfectly straight, vertical columns of gray and blue, like the pillars of a ghostly temple. At the kitchen door, the wood is unloaded into the interior wood box, a massive chest made of iron-bound cedar that sits in the warmth of the hallway. The transition from the cold air of the store to the warm, humid atmosphere of the interior is a sensory shift of profound comfort. The smell of the wood smoke from the great hall meets the scent of the fresh logs, creating a complex, layered aroma of fire and forest. The logs are stacked once more, their varied shapes fitting together like the pieces of a slow, wooden puzzle. This is the final resting place of the wood before its transformation into heat, a quiet waiting area in the heart of the house. Beyond the wood stacking, there is the matter of the hearth maintenance. The great fireplace in the hall is a living entity, requiring constant, gentle care to ensure its continued health. As the afternoon light fades into a deep, velvety indigo, the task of sifting the ashes begins. This is perhaps the most quiet and meditative of all the household chores. A large, shallow metal tray is used to catch the cooling ashes from the perimeter of the fire. The ash is a fine, silken powder, the color of a dove's wing, and it holds the residual heat of the day with a soft, persistent intensity. The ash is then passed through a fine wire sieve. The sound of this process is an extraordinary ASMR trigger, a soft, rhythmic hush-hush shh as the fine powder falls through the mesh and into a wooden bucket below. The larger fragments of charcoal, still black and jagged, are caught in the sieve. These are not discarded. They are precious remnants of heat that will be returned to the fire to serve as the foundation for the next log. The fingers, even through the wool of the mittens, can sense the incredible softness of the sifted ash. It is a substance that feels like liquid silk, a material that has been purified by the flame. The sifted ash is a valuable resource in the post-plague economy. It will be stored in the cellar and used in the spring for the making of lye and soap, or spread upon the kitchen garden to sweeten the soil. In the manor house, nothing is wasted. Every byproduct of survival is part of a slow, circular ecology. The act of sifting is a ritual of preservation, a way of honoring the energy of the wood and ensuring the continuity of the household's warmth. As the last of the ash is processed, the hearth is swept clean with a small broom made of stiff heather twigs. The sound of the heather against the stone is a crisp, rhythmic scritch-scritch, a clean noise that marks the transition from the labor of the day to the rest of the evening. The fire is then rebuilt with the new logs from the barrow. First, a few curls of birch bark are tucked into the glowing embers, catching instantly with a bright, cheerful pop and a sudden flare of yellow light. Then the ash wood is added, followed by the heavy, reliable oak. The fire begins to climb the new logs, the flames licking at the bark with a soft, rhythmic hiss. The sound of the fire is a complex symphony of small noises, the sharp crackle of the birch, the steady hum of the ash, and the deep, occasional thump as an oak log settles into the bed of coals. The heat radiates outward in a slow, invisible wave, pushing back the shadows and reclaiming the center of the hall. The light is amber and gold, flickering across the stone floor and the timbered ceiling in a hypnotic, ever-changing dance. Outside the manor walls, the darkness has become absolute. The stars are brilliant and cold, piercing the thin veil of the winter atmosphere with a fierce, uncompromising light. The silence of the landscape is total, a vast and echoing quietude that stretches from the valley floor to the highest peaks of the hills. The world is at rest, held in the freezing embrace of the 14th century night. But inside, within the thick stone walls and beneath the heavy thatch, the fire is a constant, pulsing heart. The body feels a deep, pleasant exhaustion, the result of the afternoon's slow, physical labor. The muscles in the arms and back are warm and loose, and the mind is as clear as the winter air. There is a profound sense of security in the knowledge that the wood boxes are full, the hearth is clean, and the fire is strong. In the post-Black Death world, where so much has been lost, these simple, monotonous certainties are the true wealth of the spirit. Sitting by the fire, one can observe the slow transformation of the room as the night deepens. The corners of the hall retreat into a velvety blackness, leaving only the circle of warmth and light around the hearth. The shadows of the furniture move with the rhythm of the flames, turning the familiar space into a landscape of dreams. The smell of the wood smoke is a comforting, ancient perfume, a scent that has signaled safety and companionship since the beginning of time. The tasks of the day are complete. The wood is stored, the seeds are sorted, the iron is oiled, and the records are kept. The house is a fortress of order in a world of silence. The rhythm of the manor, the slow, monotonous pulse of maintenance and preparation, is a lullaby that carries the inhabitants through the long, dark months of the winter. There is no need for haste, no need for the frantic energy of the summer harvest. The winter is a time for being, for resting, and for the slow, beautiful accumulation of quiet hours. As the eyes grow heavy and the mind begins to drift, the last thing sensed is the rhythmic breathing of the fire, the slow, steady intake of air and the soft, crackling exhale of heat. The world is safe, the hearth is warm, and the night is long. The Black Death is a shadow that has passed, leaving behind a world that is simpler, slower, and infinitely more peaceful. The mind sinks into the amber light, falling deeper and deeper into the velvet embrace of a dreamless, restorative sleep. All is still. All is quiet. All is well. The deepest hour of the winter night has arrived, that profound and hollow space between the death of the old day and the uncertain birth of the new. Outside the manor, the world has achieved a state of absolute crystalline perfection. The moon, a cold and silver orb, hangs suspended in a sky of such clarity that the stars appear not as distant lights, but as sharp, multifaceted diamonds embedded in a canopy of black velvet. The snow-covered landscape is a study in silence. The drifts have settled into smooth, undulating curves that mirror the hills beneath, and the frost has claimed every surface, turning the skeletal hedgerows into intricate sculptures of glass. It is a world without movement, a world where the very concept of time seems to have frozen solid in the sub-zero air. Inside the manor, the atmosphere has reached its ultimate state of boring but cozy tranquility. The great hall, once the center of the day's quiet industry, is now a cathedral of shadows. The fire in the hearth has been meticulously banked for the night. A thick, insulating layer of gray-white ash has been spread over the glowing core of the oak logs. Beneath this powdery blanket, the embers pulse with a slow, rhythmic light, a deep orange heartbeat that will sustain the warmth of the stones until the first servant stirs at dawn. The heat that radiates from the hearth is no longer a fierce, flickering thing, but a steady, invisible presence that permeates the very air, making it feel heavy and comfortable. The final task of the evening is the slow, ritualistic walk through the lower reaches of the house to ensure that all is at rest. This is not a search for intruders or a check for danger, for in this sparsely populated post-plague valley, the only visitor is the wind. Rather, it is a meditation on the solidity and the security of the home. The footsteps on the stone flags of the hall are muffled by the thick layer of dried rushes, which release a faint, ghostly scent of meadowsweet and summer dust with every slow, deliberate step. The sound is a rhythmic, dry hush-hush, a sound that seems to encourage the mind to let go of its last remaining thoughts. Passing through the heavy oak door into the pantry, the air becomes several degrees cooler, a refreshing contrast to the warmth of the hall. The larder is a sanctuary of quiet abundance. In the dim, silver light filtering through a high, barred vent, The rows of ceramic crocks and wooden bins are visible. The smell here is grounding and ancient. The scent of salted pork, dried apples, and the earthy, mineral tang of the stone walls. A single, heavy iron key hangs on a peg. It is cold and smooth to the touch, its surface polished by centuries of use. The key is turned in the lock of the spice chest with a slow, rhythmic click-clack, a metallic finality that signals the end of the day's logistics. The journey continues toward the kitchen, where the residual heat of the great oven still lingers in the air. The copper pots, polished so carefully earlier in the day, hang in silent, shimmering rows, reflecting the faint, ethereal light of the moon. The wooden table, scrubbed clean and dusted with a final layer of flour, is a vast, pale landscape in the darkness. There is a profound sense of order here. The spoons are in their racks, the knives are in their sheaths, and the water buckets are full and still. The only sound is the rhythmic, microscopic ticking of the cooling iron range, a series of tiny, metallic contractions that mark the slow dissipation of the day's energy. The ascent to the upper sleeping quarters is a transition into a realm of even deeper quietude. The staircase, a spiral of solid gritstone, is a tunnel of shadow. Each step is a familiar, tactile experience. The slight hollow in the center of the stone where generations of feet have trod, the coolness of the lime-washed wall against the hand, and the way the air grows thinner and more still as one rises. The landing is a narrow gallery of timber and plaster, the oak beams overhead groaning softly as they contract in the tightening grip of the external frost. It is a low-pitched, resonant sound, like the house is sighing in its sleep. The bedroom is the ultimate destination, a small, square chamber tucked under the slope of the heavy, thatched roof. The window is a single pane of thick, bubbled glass, now entirely covered in a magnificent tapestry of frost. The patterns are fractal and complex, fern-like fronds, delicate stars, and long, shimmering needles of ice that have grown across the interior surface. To look at them is to see the very architecture of the cold. The light of the moon filters through this icy screen, filling the room with a soft, diffused glow that is neither white nor blue, but a ghostly, subterranean silver. The furniture in the room is simple and heavy, made of dark, oil-rubbed oak. There is a small chest at the foot of the bed, its iron hinges glinting dully. The scent in the room is a delicate, comforting blend of dry thatch, lavender, and the faint, sweet aroma of the beeswax candle that was extinguished moments ago. The air is crisp and clean, but the bed itself is a fortress of warmth. The bed is a massive framework of wood, supporting a thick mattress stuffed with the finest dried bracken and oat straw. Over this lies a secondary mattress of goose feathers, so soft and deep that it seems to swallow any weight placed upon it. The linens are of heavy, hand-woven hemp, which has been scoured and laundered until it is soft against the skin, yet retains a sturdy, reassuring texture. Then come the blankets, 4 layers of dense, felted wool, each one weighing several pounds. They are the color of the sheep that provided them, creams, grays, and deep, chocolate browns. The process of getting into bed is a slow, rhythmic surrender to the night. The clothes are laid aside, the heavy woolen tunic and hose replaced by a long shift of fine bleached linen. The fabric is cool at first, a brief bracing sensation, but it quickly begins to trap the heat of the body. To climb into the bed is to disappear into a cocoon of absolute softness. The straw mattress rustles with a deep, earthy crunch hush, a sound like a distant sea, as it adjusts to the form of the body. The feather mattress rises up around the limbs, cradling them in a weightless, thermal embrace. As the layers of woolen blankets are pulled up to the chin, the world outside the bed ceases to matter. The weight of the covers is a physical manifestation of security, a heavy, warm pressure that signals to the nervous system that the day's labor is over and the time for restoration has come. The cold of the room is a distant thing, a background element that only serves to emphasize the incredible, concentrated warmth of the bed. The mind begins to drift, the thoughts slowing down until they are nothing more than vague, rhythmic impressions of the day's events. In this post-Black Death world, the silence of the night is a precious and restorative thing. The population has been thinned, the frantic pace of the old world has been broken, and what remains is this vast, beautiful quiet. The village is asleep, the horses are asleep, the very earth is asleep beneath its blanket of snow. There is no conflict, no urgency, and no noise. The world is healing itself in the stillness, and the manor house is a part of that healing, a stone and timber sanctuary that has stood for centuries and will stand for many more. The rhythm of the breathing begins to synchronize with the slow, deep pulse of the house. The cooling of the stones, the settling of the thatch, the dying of the embers, all of these are part of a single, hypnotic symphony of rest. The eyes close, and the darkness behind the lids is the same velvet black as the winter sky. The last sound perceived is the faint, rhythmic scratching of a dry branch against the stone of the outer wall, a sound that is not a disturbance, but a lullaby, a reminder of the vast, indifferent, and peaceful wilderness that surrounds this small pocket of human warmth. The mind sinks deeper, passing through layers of consciousness like a stone falling into a deep, still well. The memories of the day, the texture of the parchment, the smell of the neatsfoot oil, the rhythmic zip of the weaving loom, and the cold, crystalline air of the wood store, all melt into a single golden blur of contentment. There is no past, there is no future, there is only the immense, monotonous, and beautiful present. The body is heavy, the spirit is light, and the world is at peace. The long winter night continues its slow, silent rotation. The stars move across the sky in their ancient, unchanging patterns, and the frost continues to grow upon the glass. The manor house, held in the amber and iron grip of the 14th century, remains a steadfast witness to the continuity of life. The great mortality is a shadow that has retreated into the pages of history. The reality is this bed, this warmth, and this profound, hypnotic silence. The sleep that follows is deep, dreamless, and absolute, a restorative journey into the heart of the winter peace. All is still, all is quiet, all is well. The end.